Hello and welcome to Talking F1. We're a podcast from Grand Prix Grandstand that does more or less that. We talk about F1. More specifically, that means talking about Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 and the W Series. I'm your host, Jim Kimberley, and today we have a full house as I'm joined by Gareth Winslade, Thiemo Albers-Daly and Jacob Phillips. And also, Gareth returning. We've got Formula 3 returning, Gareth, and what a race it was.
Well, 3 amazing races for the F3 Championship, and it was a cracking weekend all round. But I think for me it showed these drivers are juniors, and there was a bit of racecraft missing, I think, as we saw in race 2. But plenty to unpack there.
Yeah, plenty indeed. I should also mention for anybody listening or watching that we have a uninvited guest of builders downstairs. So if you hear banging, that's all my fault. I put my hands up and take full responsibility for that. But for me, Formula 3, I've watched highlights of it last season with Formula 1's YouTube presence building up, but I've never watched full races, certainly not 3 full races, although that's a new format. But watching the full races was great. And Thiemo, I know you've watched Formula 3 and you've got the Drive Tribe for the Formula 2 and Formula 3 races. And wow, is this what we're expecting for an entire season now, for three manic, different but great races?
It was a curious one for me because it was Barcelona for the opening, and it was the only round last year that I really don't remember that much about, which for F3 is quite unusual. So I was pleasantly surprised this weekend with how the new format was. It worked quite well for me, and the racing was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be for Barcelona. It was typical F3, and I'm hoping that it's just a perfect teaser of what's going to come for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I really hope so. With some amazing wheel-to-wheel racing, and I was quite surprised myself at seeing some of the drivers actually showing a bit of maturity. I know there's a lot of racecraft to be learned from these youngsters, but there were fewer crashes than I expected, actually, especially when you're seeing, we'll talk about race 2, I'm sure, but especially when you're seeing some of the DRS overtakes into the turn 1, turn 2 complex. Jacob, how did you view the whole weekend for Formula 3's return?
Well, it was, for me, a fantastic return. Like Thiemo said, it was Barcelona, and me, I myself didn't really remember much from the weekend. So I came in, like the F1, with very limited expectations. But for what we saw in the most part, it was very good racing. I thought the race 2 was probably the best, given, loads of overtakes, DRS or not, and obviously the crashes between the front 4 there. But yeah, it was a really good weekend. I thought the feature race was probably the worst of the 3.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel it's a little bit... Now I've got the Formula 2, the Bahrain racing, I knew what to expect, but the feature race is almost a problem, and I put air quotes out with problem with Formula 1, that it's the fastest guys at the front and the slowest guys at the back, and we saw Hauger just completely dominate, and we'll talk a bit about Hauger, I'm sure, soon. He looked very, very strong. Gareth, you enjoyed the racing late last night, I believe, for the Formula 3 race 3/feature race. How did you think it compared to the other ones?
Yeah, it was not the best. I guess it's the like you say, you've got the fastest guys at the front, and the fastest guys are going to win the race. And we've lost that differentiator that there used to be, where an F1 car or a single seater might be really good in qualifying and then not so good in the race trim. And we don't have that anymore, because the cars, they come out in qualifying, and that's their parc fermé conditions for the whole rest of the racing as well. So, the car that's quick in qualifying is the car that's quick in the race. And I think that's just a byproduct of where we are with, trying to cut down on costs, really. It's a shame, but, it wasn't bad. It was still quite a good race, just not on a level of the 2 on the Saturday.
Yeah, it's weird with what I would consider, you've got this crescendo of race 3 that you're building up from race 1 to race 2 to race 3, and race 3 felt not flat, but after race 2, which was bonkers and full of entertainment, I'm hoping that would be the race 2 for all of them. It was good to see that in terms of the podium finishing positions, these were the fastest guys generally across the weekend, and they were getting just rewards for more points available on Sunday. Also, being just the second billing to Formula 1 is an amazing thing for those guys. people in the Red Bull Junior team, the Alpine Academy and stuff, going to be right in front of the Formula One people, unlike having it last year with Formula 2 taking some of the shine off. But yeah, Formula 3, race 3, I think that's going to be potentially similar to the rest of the season. We'll see the fast guys at the front, and Gareth, you're completely right, with no qualifying cars this year or these days. But apart from that, though, do you want to go through these races? Thiemo, your thoughts on the rookies that have come in, the people returning? We've got several drivers returning, but a whole field of rookies. Anybody standing out for you?
I think Martins was the standout rookie for me. He just kind of seemed to forget that he was the rookie and just was on the pace straight away. We had that with F2 back in Bahrain. A couple of the rookies there kind of forgot that it was their first time out and was like, well, why can't I be here? And he just seemed to be right on the money straight away there, and had some decent results out of it. I think the other person that stood out for me in both the good and the bad way was Arthur Leclerc, because he had a tough time of it with qualifying, and then with the safety car infringement penalty that he got after such a good comeback, after being kind of finishing down in, what was it, 28th or something in the first race because
really
of
hurt him.
the puncture. And then he gets all the way back up, doing a mega drive there, and then gets a penalty and drops him all the way back to 24th or something. So I thought once he gets going properly, then he should be one to watch, I think. So I think it was just a bit of bad luck for him. But those were the top two rookies for me, I think.
Jacob, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I very much agree with Thiemo. In fact, I alluded it to in the F3 takeaway article that you'll see soon on the GP Grandstand website. I very much agree with that. I think Martins, really was on the money from the word go. That second place in the second race was excellent, and he got consistent results over the weekend. You know, he's P3 there in the championship after a solid weekend. So yeah, I really think that he was on it. And actually, to be fair, sorry to copy you again, Thiemo, but I've actually written down here about it a bit later in our top 3 best and worst. I thought, Leclerc had a poor weekend, given the name and the fact that he performed really well in the feeder series last year. I thought he was going to be right up there, or at least sort of around the top 10, and he was really nowhere. Obviously, he got a puncture in race 1, which obviously set him up for a poor race in race 2, but I think the qualifying performance and the penalty was, I expected a lot more from the Monegasque driver this weekend.
Yeah, you're with me on that one, Jacob, actually, because it's funny, because I've seen people saying online that Arthur Leclerc is not, he's not as good as Charles, and he was kind of almost lucky with his FREC results to be where he was. So I felt he was a bit disappointing, and I'm hoping he steps his game up more, and we see a lot more from him as we go further down the season, and that's more in line with what I've seen online as well. And it does remind me of the picks as well. If you remember, Charles Pic made it to F1, Arthur Pic didn't, and we could be heading for history repeating with Charles and Arthur Leclerc.
You're all too doom and gloom, you two.
Not at all.
Let's pick up on that, though, briefly, though. There were quite a few names that you might recognise just from the surnames on the grid this week that, well, for this whole season, of course, that we saw Leclerc and Arthur not doing great, but very impacted by the format, that you had 3 poor results because of a poor qualifying and then a really unfortunate incident with race 1 that's going to just screw you up for the entire weekend, as it will be in Formula 2 as well. We saw David Schumacher also racing as well. And for me, I worry that I'm looking at the names that I recognise at the moment when I don't know, some of these drivers. He's got Novalak and Smolya. I'm just like, I don't know who you are, but Schumacher, oh, yeah, tied to Ralph. So I don't know if I'm laser focused on these guys, that I will see them and assess them differently. And I think it's almost certain that I am. I've got Fittipaldi as well, who was on for a race win at one point, but struggling aside from that for the weekend. And Doohan, who's got motorbike genes, as far as I understand. I tend to keep my racing on 4 wheels. But again, are we looking at these or am I looking at these maybe, Thiemo, in the eyes incorrectly, that they're not their relatives and they should be assessed for their own things? And I'm maybe being a bit too harsh, because I thought Schumacher had a bit of a torrid old weekend. Very unfortunate getting hit out, but aside from that,
I think they should definitely be measured on their own merits. Just because your dad has a famous name doesn't mean you're going to be as good. I mean, if we based Max Verstappen off Jos Verstappen, we wouldn't think too much success is going to come his way, for example. But I mean, David Schumacher last season didn't really do much to impress me, so I wasn't sure about what he would do this time around. And up until he got properly elbowed off the track in quite an amusing fashion, not for him probably, but I thought he was doing all right up until that point. All things considered, I was like, okay, maybe he's doing something. He wasn't doing superbly, but he was doing solid enough job, which compared to last year, I thought was a step up at least. So interesting to see what he can do moving forward, and if it was a one-off, and if he's going to go back to normal, or if this team switch is going to work out for him now.
Yeah, I saw some of his racing. I think it's the first race where he was weaving quite aggressively down the main straight, and I don't know if this was a thing, but I was just thinking, oh, it's Schumacher, and I picked up on it. Whereas, as I mentioned a second ago, if it was a name I wasn't familiar with, I was like, oh, what are these F3 drivers like? Just learning their racecraft. Something I think we're going to speak about, but something that happened in the main race as well for Formula One, that we saw Ricciardo snaking up and down the pit straight, just trying to break the toe. Jacob, your thoughts on these famous names?
Well, when it comes to famous names, I think it can help you get to the motorsport, but I don't think it can help you get results. You can't just rely on the name; you have to rely on talent as well. We've seen countless examples. Thiemo mentioned the Verstappen example there. You had not a son, of course, but a Bruno Senna and the Ayrton Senna example, Mario Andretti and Michael Andretti, I think it was back in the 80s or the early 90s, I think. So, yeah, the name doesn't exactly buy you talent. And I think there's one name we're forgetting as well. Obviously, Nannini, son, I think Matteo Nannini, son of one-time Grand Prix winner Alessandro Nannini, I think was his name. You might want to correct me on that, Gareth. But yeah, so certainly didn't. Certainly doesn't buy you talent. And yeah, I was a bit disappointed. We mentioned Leclerc there as well. I don't think he's up to the capabilities of his brother, for example. David Schumacher. I've seen some people online talking about, can he get up to F1? I'm not so sure about that as well. So yeah, a little bit disappointing from the guys there with so-called famous names, for example.
You also wonder as well, I think, about if they didn't have the famous name behind them, how far would they have got through the door into F3 or further? So
exactly.
Yeah. But you got to remember that Alesi, for example, Giuliano Alesi was racing in F2 last year and has gone this year. He didn't make it with his talent. And Dudu Barrichello is racing in Freck this season with fairly underwhelming results so far. We'll see what he can do further down the line. But yeah, I actually thought David Schumacher's race 2 was looking excellent. Actually, I was really, really pleasantly surprised by it. The speed that his car snapped sideways from that impact really reminded me of a pinball, the way he suddenly went and he was gone into the barriers. So relieved to see him getting out of the car unharmed actually after that one, because it was a nasty accident. But yeah, waiting to see if he can deliver down the line. But so far, yeah, the results aren't there.
I would love to have the surname to be able to get into motorsport, and the money would be all right as well of having a Schumacher name. But yeah, there is going to be a lot of that. We've already seen now Mick, and Mick's done tremendously to have risen as he has, and he had a pretty decent race, taking a few places off the line again this week. That I really feel sorry for David, already, that he's going to be looked at like this, and can he make another Schumacher repeat history and have Schumacher relatives in Formula One? I think the sport's so different now. It's so difficult to get there. We've got these driver programs to get drivers there, and they very much have a set path now that if you're not in a driver program, you are going to struggle. And I think there's just not enough seats until Formula One goes back to a 26 car grid. That if we ever get back there, the budget cap, fingers crossed, will allow us. But if there's just so few seats, we've seen last year. Well, we're going to speak about Mazepin a little bit, but we saw Mazepin's made it through this year, while we're getting drivers not getting through. De Vries, example, he's not racing in Formula One. And we're in this just weird situation that, if he's not going to have the talent, he's not going to get there without a huge amount of financial backing. And I just don't think Schumacher's going to make it to repeat it. But let's speak about race 2 briefly, or extensively. What a race that was. I was thinking, who's going to win? The top 6 broke away, and then everybody decided they didn't want to win the race. Is this something, Thiemo, that we're going to see throughout the season that these guys, were they buckling under pressure? Was it just poor racecraft, or what happened from your point of view?
So you say the top six broke away, and then they kind of did so quite literally after that with various incidents they had. So it was quite entertaining to watch. I mean, I don't know if it's just first race getting back into the swing of things, and we went a bit too far on some of these things, and accidents happened as a result of that, or if that's going to be a staple of the season. But either way, I'm kind of there for it, because if we can get the close racing without the accident, then that would be ideal then, because you want to see that close racing right down to the line. But like Gareth was saying earlier, the shunt with Schumacher, it was there was nothing really he could do to even prevent it. Like, as soon as he was hit, it was just, nope, you're gone, you're not coming back whatsoever. And then you think, okay, there's the last bit of drama, and then a few laps later it happens again. You get the two cars spun round there. I thought, there's no way it's going to happen. I was looking at Vesti then and thinking, well, you know what, you were sitting down in eighth, you're looking at a podium here. You just need that to happen a third time. We didn't think it was going to happen twice. One more time and you're winning this thing. Go for it. He's been planning this the whole time, so it was very entertaining. And again, hopefully not a staple of things to come, but again, I'll take the close racing without the bumping.
Yeah, I think watching a bit of the Formula E on the weekend and not knowing who's going to win the race, it was ace to be watching something. I preferred the crashes not to happen. I like to see people win on merit, but that race, Jacob, from your perspective, the highlight of the weekend?
Yeah, certainly, and probably one of the best races I've ever seen around the circuit to Catalunya. But then again, that's not hard. It was fantastic to see. Like you mentioned, Formula E there. I'm not the biggest Formula E fan myself, but I definitely need to get into that, as you guys have told me several times. But it was great to come into the race, and certainly throughout the race, not knowing who was going to win. Colwell in the end came through with a victory, and well, that was quite lucky considering, seventh on the grid, and you never ever win from seventh on the grid in Barcelona. So it was great, and that jeopardy as well. I'll take a few more races like that this season. Obviously, like you say, Jim, not necessarily all the time the crashes, because you want to see the overtakes on the track. But that certainly set us up for what I thought was going to be another great race on Sunday. But yeah, certainly the highlight of the weekend for me by far.
Yeah. It reminds me as well of what you were saying last week, Jim, on this podcast about F1 being sport. Anything can happen, but then it usually doesn't. F3 is then living up to that name, then, where anything can happen, and it does.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, apart from race 3, which is a bit quiet, but still had its moments.
That was standard Barcelona, that one in the end.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a Formula 3 is a sport where anything can happen, and does happen from what I've seen so far. And Gareth, from your perspective, race 2, Hauger too eager to try and get past to really hammer how good he was, or he was at fault for that from my perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, no question of it for me. Just it felt too keen, too eager to. He knows he's in the quickest car, and he knows he probably is championship favourite going into the start of the season. So he just wanted to deliver that result ASAP, didn't he? And yeah, a second lap and a second attempt probably would have been much the wiser. Such a shame we lost Smolja so early in that race as well. Was it Novalak who his tyre got sliced on his front wing going into turn 1? I think he would have been right up there again. And perhaps we could see Smolja versus Hauger for the title. I mean, he's been a revelation for me this weekend. Like you said before, with those names that you don't know. And Smolja and Novalak, I thought they were pretty handy.
Yeah,
I think the other interesting thing to note from this weekend as well is that Hauger too keen to maybe try and get in front there. He's determined to win every race, whereas you have some other drivers who they might not be winning races. I mean, I'll use the Vesti example again. He had a solid enough weekend overall, but you want those solid, consistent performances to be in contention for the championship. You don't need to be winning every single race. You just need to be in or near the top 3 most of the time to be in with a chance at the end of it. Because if you're going for the win and then you crash out, that's a lot of points that you don't get anything at all there. And that could be what undoes you by the end of the season.
We're not we are talking for F-all, but we're not Formula E typically. But I did look when I was doing some writing for the Formula E, and the current championship leader, Robin Freins, hasn't won a race in Formula E this season. Meanwhile, I think that's something that there's going to be so many race winners in the Formula 3 and the Formula 2 season, but it is that consistency which I think could be key. And you mentioned Victor Martins earlier, that he was just there all the time. He was there chipping away, getting points. And race 3 is the big one. You 25 points for a win, so Hauger recovered very well. But Martins didn't have to win a race to be still doing all right in the championship because he's just getting points consistently. Is that sort of thing, Thiemo, you need to have for a championship campaign?
So I think that's what you need to hook it up if you want to win a championship. You can't be relying on doing well in the feature race. If you do what Hauger did and you qualify in pole and you're just like, well, as long as that race goes fine, then I can do whatever I want in the other two. Because I think then that kind of mentality, you're not showing that level of maturity needed to win overall. They need to be thinking the long game. And at the moment, I think Hauger's not thinking about that. He's just thinking about, I want to win, I want to perform, and this is the only way I know how to. Whereas other drivers maybe have already clocked that, or not, but they seem to be at least falling into the right way of going about it. So
I wonder if there's a bit of that, which is the first race syndrome, that you just get that first victory out of the way, and then he might calm down a little bit. Speaking of other victories, though, Smollier that you mentioned, Gareth, he deserved winner. He won the first race with the reverse grid, which kind of topsy-turvy, and Caldwell won the other race. Those guys deserved winners. Caldwell seemed to fall in his lap, but he didn't do anything wrong. So,
no, Smollier definitely deserved the win, I thought. And whereas Caldwell, yeah, a little bit lucky for it, but his pace was there this weekend. It wasn't, he's not Hauger level, but he was close to it. And I'm interested to see what he can do next time. But Hauger's weekend, did anyone else find it really reminiscent of Joe's weekend in Bahrain? Apart from the accident in race 2, I felt his performance was just really reminiscent of the way Joe went about his racing in F2. So could we be seeing a pattern going forward between those two drivers?
It might not be.
You mentioned it's an interesting parallel there. So
yeah, it might not necessarily be through the drivers, but it might be through the format potentially. That if Hauger suited Barcelona and Joe suited Bahrain, it could be Schwartzman suited Monaco next time out, and the same sort of thing. Monaco even more so with how that reverse grid, that pole position could really hurt you in some regards. But yeah, these other race winners and other podium finishes. I saw Nannini getting the podium, and he's doing a dual campaign this year. Jacob, are these the drivers we expected to see on the podium all the time, or is it just going to be literally anybody from that 30 who's going to make it onto the top 3 positions?
No, certainly, obviously it's a lot more unpredictable than F1, so you are going to see a whole host of race winners over the season, but you've got to look back to Prema. They've dominated sort of the junior formulas now for a few years, and so you've got to look at those drivers and think, they're the favourites. I said Hauger was the favourite coming into the season, and I think he will be there come Austin. But one thing to pick up on is the consistency throughout the season. I think Hauger, like you mentioned there in race 2, was a little bit too eager for the win, but obviously he picked up in race 3. But consistency is key. I think, you look back to F2 last year, Schumacher, I think, only won 2 races over the course of the season, but won the championship. And a historic example to add to that actually was Ocon in 2015. I think might have only won 1 race that season, but picked up, I think, something like 9 P2s in a row in that GP3 season. So it's about picking up those points and picking up those podiums, really. And I think whoever's the most consistent over the season will be there. But, next time out in France, there might be, it wouldn't surprise me if they have 3 new winners on that podium.
Keke Rosberg only won 1 Grand Prix on his when he won the world title. So, yeah.
I'm not even sure he got a pole position that season as well.
No, just shows you. I was going to say Nannini was interesting for me because he looked a lot more racy and like he belonged in F3 than he does in F2. In F2, maybe I'm predisposed to be a bit like I'm a bit down on the guy because he's racing both categories at the same time, and for me, I just don't feel that's right. As we've talked about before, I feel like if you're good enough to be in F2, you should be in F2, or you're an F3 level driver trying to get up to F2. You shouldn't be doing both at the same time. It's just super license point farming. But yeah, in the F3 car, he looked a lot more comfortable and racy than he does in the F2 car so far. So we'll wait and see what happens over the course of the season, though. But yeah, interesting stuff.
It surprised me a little bit to see Nannini, because when that was announced earlier, this was the first time a racer could realistically race in both series at once. And I'm surprised Nannini was the only one to actually opt for it. I expected to see a flurry of drivers, but I'm guessing finance plays a significant part in being able to do that. But yeah, I agree. I was happy to see him do well, because I want to see somebody I'm going to see every support series weekend doing well. That's great to see. But yeah, looked comfortable. I think that's exactly the right word. I don't know if he's found his level, but he looked a lot more comfortable in the car, seemed fairly fast, deserved of being up in the places where he was at the sharp end of the grid. And yeah, got a podium at the end of it. One person who didn't get a podium, Logan Sargent, last year's title antagonist. Thiemo did pretty well, got the Chiroux drive very late on and then returns it in what I think Alex Shake said was the best result that Chiroux's had in Formula 3 with a P4. Is that right?
I think that's what he said, yeah. But it's the awkward thing for me. Is like he did well considering everything, but also he's on my bottom 3 drivers for later because I was expecting more from him just because of how well he did last year. So I know he's not in the same kind of machinery that he was last year, but I was still thinking that's not always a necessary thing to have in your corner if you're good enough as a driver. And I thought that there was enough skill behind the wheel last year to prove that he could get that a bit further up this weekend. But again, it might just be first weekend back and getting up to speed with everything. And if that's what he can do straight out and he can build on that moving forward, then maybe he'll get out of my bad books and he'll be back in time for France and be all good again.
Bad books. I'm really surprised to hear you say that. As far as I'm aware, and I'll reiterate to people listening that this is my first Formula 3 full-on season, but I don't think Chiroux are one of the top teams you expect to see. You expect to see ART up there, obviously Prema and stuff. So I thought him driving what would essentially be Hamilton going into an Alfa Romeo and then getting almost on the podium, I thought this was a really...
Don't get me wrong, I was happy with them, but I still felt there was something lacking overall. So I was kind of conflicted there because I kind of forgot about the whole other team, but then at the same time, so I've kind of in two minds, but I'm leaning more towards disappointment.
I think the thing that's lacking is a budget for somebody to get him elevated into Formula 2, which is what I think should have happened from what we saw last year. Jacob, your thoughts? Logan Sargent doing well, very, very late coming back or getting announced to drive for Chiroux?
Thiemo, I'm going to have to disagree with you a bit there, mate. I thought he had quite a good weekend, actually. Obviously, not up to the standards of last year, but he was driving a championship contending car. I thought he showed great maturity to secure P5 there. I think was it P4 or P5?
P4. I'm just
P4, yeah. And like Alex Shake said, the best result Chiroux's have got in a long time. Doubling the points tally they got from last season. Their best result last season was P8 in a sprint race in Monza. So I thought it was a great weekend. Also, there may be a bit of confidence issues. Obviously, he only knew he was driving this time last week, so maybe he didn't have preparation time to get his head in the right gear. So I think we'll see more answers come France. But I thought that's a solid start for Logan Sargent there.
You can play good cop and I'll be bad cop, Jacob.
I almost dread to ask this, Gareth, because I know you have very strong feelings about this, but Logan Sargent coming back, the budget is clearly a problem. So you've got one of the faster drivers from last season now being punted to the back. I'm guessing on some discounted rate because Chiroux will just want to have drivers. Should we see him in Formula 2?
Yeah, of course. I absolutely agree. And we should be seeing him up there because Piastri and Correa, he was battling for the title with them. They've gone up. Piastri won a race. Correa's, looking fairly strong in the F2 car. And where's Piastri? Where's Sargent? He's stuck down in F3 again and only got that lifeline drive. I put that article on GP Grandstand a while back about how I think Liberty Media should be funding a last chance saloon Formula 3 and Formula 2 team for these drivers who are struggling to get a budget because they're just shooting themselves in the foot by not having what is a clearly talented American driver in the field. It's good for their TV ratings and stuff. So they should be ensuring that the route to F1 is still open for these guys. I fully agree with you, Jim, where you were saying about how narrow and difficult it is to get an F1 seat these days because we've got. I was doing a rough count the other day with you've got Stroll and Latifi and Mazepin who are there because of their money. So straight away you've lost 3 of your 20 seats, and you've got old former champions just kicking about into their retirement years, and they should be, it should be swept out really. And that's sort of 5 seats you've lost out of 20 already. So yeah, I'd want to see Sargent in F2. I want to see him in a good team. I want to see what he can do. But at the same time, this is his this is quite a fascinating season and a chance for him to do some serious wow stuff in a lower midfield team. If he can drag out more fourth places, then more power to his right foot, and let's get him higher up the grid.
I think he reminds me a bit as well of Callum Ilott for F2 not making it into F1. It's that kind of, he should have been there, but for reasons that he can't control, he's just not able to get there, and other people are able to make the step up, and he should be right along with him, but the system's not made for it at the moment.
No.
Yeah, it's a crying shame, but yeah, congratulations from my side, and I don't know what yours talk about, Thiemo, with disappointment from Sargent. How dare you? But I think three of us, at least on the podcast, are giving you a round of applause, Mr. Sargent, for quite a competitive weekend back. And if he wasn't punted out at the first lap, was it, on the race 2, he could have, with how chaotic that race was, could have easily been getting a podium or a great haul of points there as well. One good element and a really good news for racing in general, Juan Manuel Correa back racing on the Formula One billing after a difficult year and a half of rehabilitation. Gareth, how good was that to see a driver go through such a horrific, potentially an entirely life-changing incident, and coming back to race and do what he loves best?
It was amazing. I mean, he said that when the accident actually happened, his legs were being held on by his race suit, according to the doctors, which just is so disgusting and horrible to think about. So yeah, to see the guy in a race car is incredible. And you know, all of last year we were all stood outside clapping for the NHS, but we should bring in the official GP Grandstand hooray for Correa, because yeah, the guy rocked.
Got to give suit kudos to the people who made the race suits as well.
Yeah.
It was a hell of a good weekend. I don't know what I'm expecting from him this season. Just the fact he's racing at all is one thing. But Thiemo, are we expecting to see him go forwards and win the championship, or are we just happy to see him race?
So I'm not expecting to win the championship, but I was pleasantly surprised that he got a couple of points out of his first weekend back, all things considered. And I'm loving his mentality as well, because I think it was after qualifying on Friday that he was on the team radio on the warm-down lap saying that he was disappointed with where he was, which you've got to think, if you're coming back from that, you'll think, you know what, I've done all right. I've done it all. I've got all the way around. I've not been totally exhausted by it, and I can do some solid stuff. And you're thinking, yeah, you're saying he's using F3 to re-establish where he's at and hopefully jump to F2 next year. And I think with the attitude and with getting points straight away like that, I don't see a reason why he couldn't do that. It would be a perfect continuation of his comeback. So I'm not expecting him to win a championship, but again, he just needs a race like Caldwell had on Saturday, and he could win one. You never know.
Wouldn't it be great to see as well? I think I wrote with a lovely plug like you did, Jacob, on a looking back piece that's on gpgrandstand.com now, that for me, the best point of hundreds of points scored across the weekend, the solitary point you got in race 2 was the most important one for racing. Really good to see him racing, really good to see him in the midfield as well. He got, I think, he qualified 13th. I was looking then about 15th in race 3, 13th, 14th race. He just seemed to have enough pace to prove that, like we saw Kubica coming back and then just didn't quite have it, Williams aside. And Russell's obviously quite talented as well. That's an entirely different conversation, but we talk about F all here. But he just seemed to jumping back into the sport, and he's still firmly a racer who's got it, right?
The weekend, for me, nothing really else mattered in the F3. It was just great to see him back racing, and who knows what we can expect from him. He's got a point on his return. It's his first race back, and I think anything now is a bonus. I mean, we might see him on the podium, and if we do, that'll be absolutely fantastic. So I think anything he gets is a bonus. He'll take it race by race. So yeah, I think that, to be honest, he's thank God for that race. It was Thiemo said, because he's very lucky to be walking. So, but I think it was great, and it was great to hear those messages on the radio as well. I think he was crying after the second race. I might be wrong on that, but it's certainly great to hear his emotion over the team radio, and it's just so great. It's just real feel-good moment of the weekend. And it will be throughout the season, I think, as well.
I know it's different formulas, but I think it's worth just pointing out that he comes back from all that from all the physio and everything that he's been doing on for the last 18 months, gets a point in this first weekend. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel still yet to score a championship point in Formula One this year. That's all I'm saying.
You have an axe grind against Sebastian Vettel, Thiemo, don't you? That is, I understand.
It's just a fun comparison to make.
Kimi Raikkonen, I don't think, has a point this season as well. Just saying.
He's not a four-time world champion.
No, so unfortunately,
he used to be the fastest man in F1. So
yeah, funny how things go. I want to do a brief shout out because we don't really cover Formula Regional here. We've got friend of the show, Dino Boganovic, of course, that we had in the Grandstand interview. Have a listen to that if you haven't. But Formula Regional was supporting Formula One in what was a very, very busy weekend of racing, and I would love to have been at Barcelona. Great to see some fans there on Sunday too. I watched the first race, Formula Regional, and Gregoire Saucy just seems to be a man on fire, and everyone's talking about he's 3 pole positions and 3 wins in a row. I don't know if you guys, any of you saw it, shake heads, nod heads.
Planning to watch later. Yeah, could only manage so many races this weekend.
Yeah, it certainly could. It was really busy, but it just at the moment, very early days, but at the moment just seems to be showing a bit of that Leclerc dominance that we saw in Formula 2 a few years ago. And yeah, just wanted to have a little shout out as we talk about F all here. That might be a name we might see coming into Formula 3 next year and potentially dominating there too. But talking F all, we can't ignore that Formula One was back, and it's a double-header event after what I thought was quite a lackluster Portugal race. Really didn't have high hopes for Spain, thinking this is going to be Portugal but worse. It wasn't. It was great. It was a really good strategic race for the win where, like we mentioned, the Formula E thing again, I didn't know who was going to win, and it became a battle of talent with Verstappen and Hamilton, and I don't know who the better driver is because they don't have equal machinery, but they are pretty damn good, both of them. And then the teams complementing both of them, with Mercedes again showing why they can do strategy when they need to do strategy. Red Bull, usually the plucky underdogs who take the win where there isn't a win, but were fighting a couple of years ago against Ferrari and Mercedes and always there to swoop in. But when they're leading, they've been caught out a few times. They mentioned obvious comparison, Hungary 2019, the same thing happened. And of course, I'm talking about Hamilton ducking in for a pit stop and leaving Verstappen exposed to the undercut so they don't pit him, and then he just runs out of tyres. But it wasn't... They lost track position at Bahrain as well. And I'm just wondering, a Red Bull doing a bit of a Ferrari this year with their strategists. But yeah, let's just talk about the entire weekend because it was a great race, Jacob. What did you think? Hamilton, Verstappen title fight going on?
I had absolutely no expectations for the Spanish Grand Prix whatsoever. In fact, I had my sleeping bag at the ready. I was watching it in my pajamas with a hot cup of cocoa. I was fully expecting to fall asleep after what I would say was a all right Portugal. We said, it's mid of the road. I thought this was actually better than Portimao by quite some distance, actually. And, aided by that strategy fight, I thought it was a fantastic race. You mentioned Ferrari there, Jim. This season for me has absolute shades of 2018. Red Bull might margin over the slightly faster car, or it's certainly, very equal on pace. And, for me, especially around Spain, track position is key, and Red Bull made that mistake once again. So it might not even be the performance that's, of the car that's aiding Mercedes. They definitely made strides in that area, but I think it comes down to the pit wall, and Red Bull, just a bit behind. Mercedes are, very hot on strategy. We know that. So, I think they need to wise up on that pit wall.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. It could really be the only factor between the championship at this rate that Red Bull arguably could have 3 Max Verstappen wins, depending on how you look at it. I did read that they only had a set of soft tyres left, which Mercedes would have known about, and that those tyres just wouldn't last until the end of the race. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. But that is strategy. That is Formula One, and I like to say Formula One is chess played at 200 miles an hour. And I think this race was the epitome of that. Thiemo, how did you view the Spanish Grand Prix from Formula One?
Yeah, I mean, just building off what Jacob was saying, that I love the fact that Red Bull were able to identify it was like Hungary 2019, but then weren't able to do it, or if they were able to do it, but didn't do anything about it. And it seems that they might have swapped strategists with Ferrari from last year by the look of things a little bit, considering Ferrari are doing a bit better now. But yeah, no, I didn't really have too many expectations. Like Jacob said either. I mean, I like the track, but it's just not good for racing these days from the last few years for me. And I mean, the only time we've had an exciting thing was 2016. But the only reason for that was because of what happened to Hamilton and Rosberg on the first lap. I feel like if they hadn't come together, then we would have probably still looked at another Hamilton victory or Rosberg. So it would have been still Mercedes out there. So I was again pleasantly surprised. And I'm not sure if I think it was better than Portugal or not, but it was definitely at the very least on the same level for me, which for Spain I will take. So yeah.
Surprising to hear. I genuinely thought Portugal was middle of the road, as a word we used last, or the expression we used last week. In Spain, Portugal had a very strong start, then faded out, apart from the midfield, which continued a little bit. I just thought the racing through the entire field at Spain this week was great. There was strategy. I didn't know who was going to win. Gareth, you missed talking F all last week, and I know you were a bit more positive on Portugal than I was. How do you view both Portugal and Spain? Give us a long rundown of this Iberian Peninsula adventure for Formula One.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, I've just been doing some thinking, and I've worked out that if Lewis had taken his time to nail Bottas and Verstappen in Portugal, I think he would have loved the race. So if he'd stretched it out rather than doing all the work in 20 laps and then just cruising to the flag and dominating for 40 laps, you would probably have been a bit more excited about it. But yeah, I did enjoy Portugal. I do agree that it flattened out after that excitement, but I think 2 passes for the lead is something that cannot be overlooked for exciting times. So
especially in F1.
Especially in F1. On to the Spanish Grand Prix, though. I love a strategy battle, I really do, and I think it was, full credit and applause, accolades to Mercedes for pulling the trigger on it and doing it, because those first 20 laps where Lewis was just trailing around behind Verstappen, and you could see the gap was ebbing and flowing, and he was getting into DRS range and then falling out of DRS range, and it was clear that he wouldn't be able to do the job if the cars remained on equal tyres, because the performance is so close between the two. And so there was not enough performance differential to do an overtake. So when, after they'd done their first stop and he suddenly closed right in on Verstappen, and I was like, is he going to make a move? And then when he pulled into the pit lane, we were just like, whoa, hello. And it was super exciting. And as I say, I love a strategy battle, and I loved seeing the gap coming down, and, was Verstappen going to hold on to it? Because at one point I thought he might do. So yeah, it was very interesting to watch, and a really exciting chess game, like you say. The one criticism though were Valtteri Bottas. What the heck was he doing holding up Hamilton? He had the warning from the team. He was on a different strategy. There is no point holding up your teammate. That is inexcusable to me. And he definitely blocked T3 and 4.
He made me laugh a lot after the race, because he was quoted saying, I think, that I'm there to race. I was like, there's a funny time to start doing that now. Considering where you've been all season. Well, yeah, it's the kind of thing, now you've decided, okay, well, that's nice for you, but at the same time, your teammate going past you regardless. So be a team player.
Yeah, I mean, in the opening laps, he was dropped by 6-7 seconds?
I'd say Leclerc got the drop on him, and then kept him back for way longer than realistically should have, given the Ferrari is a decent car this year, but it's not Mercedes or Red Bull level, so Bottas should have been straight
down,
past
I think, on race pace. So yeah, it was surprising to see him keep behind for that long.
Yeah.
Am I the only one?
Borrowed time.
Am I the only one here? That's exactly it. Am I the only one here that knows or thinks that Valtteri knows he's on borrowed time? So he is. What's the expression?
He's been on borrowed time since 2019, to be honest.
I think the writing's on the wall, though. The regulations are changing. They're out of contract. Russell's ready to go. He's completely overcooked, if anything. And I just don't know now. Is Valtteri doing? Is it well poisoning when you know that you're leaving? So you poison the well on your way out. So I I think, Gareth, I agree that what the hell are you doing? It's your teammate. You must follow orders. However, from a neutral perspective, this is great. I add another bit of unpredictability in there. If Perez isn't going to be making an appearance this year, and I want to talk briefly about Perez, then if Bottas is going to be there to add some sort of spice, then I was delighted to see it. The only thing which I was less delighted about was it was the patent pending Bottas single corner defense that he seems to be able to mount when he's got a car faster behind him. But if it's going to be, it already is with 4 races in, if it's going to be Hamilton versus Verstappen for the championship, I don't think Bottas even holding Hamilton up is going to have any impact on his decision or Toto's decision to keep him or not. So
his decision.
he's got no decision in that.
So he didn't even have any there was no incentive to keep him behind, because it's if it's any other driver who was Max or Perez, you could understand fighting a bit, but it's Hamilton, it's your teammate, and I mean, face it, Hamilton's going to get past you if he wants to sooner or later. He proved that in Portimao, and he did it again this time. So it's like, why are you choosing the fight there with all people? I mean, from a neutral perspective as well, I agree with you, Jim. It makes it a bit more exciting. You've got a bit more drama there. But then you look over at Red Bull, and Max needed to get past Perez later on, and Perez, like, he knows he's not in the same race. He's there to back him up, and he did. He got out the way perfectly and did everything he needed to. So it's like you've kind of got an awkward balance there with Mercedes nailing the strategy, but they've got the weaker driver not helping them out too much, whereas Red Bull don't have the strategy too much, but they've got the drivers maybe sorted now a bit now that Perez is getting up to speed. So it makes for an interesting championship battle across both the drivers and constructors, but it's not ideal for Mercedes on that one.
Is Perez getting up to speed, though? Is that what's happening? That he struggled at Imola, and really difficult track to pass at. He hasn't. I'm quite surprised, because I really wanted Perez to do well. Got a car finally that could be right at the sharp end, and 4 races in, and we've seen with Ricciardo, it can take time to adapt to the car. Although Ricciardo did do a much better race this time round, but I honestly thought at this point we'd have seen Perez on the podium by now, and maybe I'm being a bit too naive thinking that the car is it's a Formula One car. You just go in it and you'll be fine. And I read about Perez using the same setup as Verstappen because he just isn't used to the car yet. But a driver of Perez's experience, 10 years plus in the sport, I really thought this guy was going to be coming in, showing that Albon and Gasly were inferior. But all I'm seeing now is that Red Bull second car is either rubbish or not as good, and Verstappen's really getting the better parts, or Verstappen is just that good. And
maybe it's he's got the Yuki Tsunoda case and he's got a different car to his teammate.
You say that's the thing that happens there. I do know that Formula One, the cars are not identical, even within the same team. So I just don't know if that is something that Red Bull have struggled with, that they just put the best parts on Max's car no matter what, or if Max is just that good. And I hope that Perez would be here to show us what that is, and it could be that he is here showing us that Max is just that good. Jacob, what do you think?
Honestly, by now we're 4 races in, and I would have said, Perez definitely, like you said, Jim would have got a podium by now. I thought, he'd be actually finishing above Bottas in most of the races. I think it comes to consistency here. He really surprised me actually in the Imola qualifying, nearly nabbing pole there, and he had a fantastic comeback drive in Bahrain after the electrics cut out on the formation lap. So I think he just needs to sort of match up the qualifying with the race. We know he's not the best qualifier anyway. He certainly obviously excelled in race conditions. He's got he's got a great grip on looking after the tyres. He's certainly, I'd say, second best to Hamilton in that regard. But I think it's a case of, that second Red Bull seat is very much cursed. It might be a case of there's 3 AlphaTauris on the grid and 1 Red Bull, or, Yuki Tsunoda assumes he's driving in Minardi, for example.
You say about consistency. Bottas also inconsistent, got pole position last time out, but then otherwise is nowhere. Gareth Perez.
He's still on the podium at the end of every race, though.
True. Yeah. Gareth, what do you think about?
Well, I think it's actually a combination of all the things you came up with. Max Verstappen is that damn good. The second Red Bull is very difficult to drive. Potentially, Max is obviously getting the benefits of everything that's coming out of the Red Bull development stream. And Perez is just still getting up to speed. I remember at the start of the season, he said, I understand now why Gasly and Albon were struggling. He was very open about the difficulties he was experiencing driving the car. And at the start of this weekend, before qualifying, he was still saying I'm still getting up to speed. I'm not happy with my performances to date. And I love the fact that he's being very open about that. And, so I don't know how long it's going to take for him to get up to speed. So as we've used yourself, Jim, I'm surprised Ricciardo's taken this long to get up to speed with the McLaren. But then wasn't he a little slow to get up to speed with the Renault back in the day as well?
So the Renault was just difficult to get up to speed at all.
Well, it was, but I'm wondering now whether there was more of an element of him trying to adjust to the car than we were expecting, or than we were seeing, because the Renault was so difficult, and so that kind of development path was masked a bit. I know he was having a lot of trouble with the brakes when he started there in 2019.
It was it was a slowdown, wasn't it? Because the Red Bull just had so much aero advantage over Renault that's why we saw him do those late lunges, and we saw him. I think it was, I can't remember who it was now actually, but early in the season on that Renault, and you saw him. Oh, it was Bahrain, and he just goes for that braking, and he was. It was like a roadrunner thing. He just kept on going, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think for Perez's credit, though, that he's out-qualified Max once this season, which, if memory serves, neither Gasly nor Albon managed. And he seems to be definitely, whilst he's not up to Max's level, which I think is going to be tricky regardless of who you are, unless you're Lewis, he's doing better than the last 2 or 3 drivers who have been Max's teammate. And it's just a matter of Max is the better driver, but that doesn't mean that Perez is a bad driver. It just means he needs to get a bit more up to speed for sure. But I think it's still moving in a positive direction, and there's good things to take away from him still. So, and it's a long season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's coming there. He will be there or thereabouts, and I think he's going to be on the podium before long. Perez is a fantastic driver. Let's not forget, that. He is one of the best. If you were a neutral coming in for this season, you'd be like, oh my God, he's rubbish. But he's not. He's definitely not.
Also, guys, one quick thing to mention with Perez. I saw some reports saying he felt a bit feverish on Saturday, had a shoulder injury. How much do you reckon that affected this weekend as well?
He did say he felt better on the Sunday, and he recovered. He recovered okay, and that's the thing I think that is different between him and his predecessors of Albon and Gasly, that he has that ability, particularly we saw in Bahrain, that he does overtake. We saw equally, was it Bahrain or Sakhir? I think it was Sakhir when he won last year, when Albon was way at the back and was just stuck there. He just didn't progress up the field like Red Bull would expect. And Perez does have that ability that he will either get that minimum required 4th place or not be far off if he's not going to get it. But he needs to sort out the qualifying because Red Bull could have won this race if they had 2 horses in the race, and it was 1.1 horses as it actually came. I do want to move on because I know we're running long, and I think what we'll end up doing is we'll cut it and then we'll go a bit longer if everyone listen to us talk about the Mazepin, because I think everybody has a few thoughts on that. But final bit on the Formula One at the moment, though, Yuki Tsunoda, torrid weekend. He just showed a bit of immaturity with slating the team publicly, and we've seen him be hilarious on team radio. He's like this unassuming, quiet-looking, polite gentleman. You see him walking around and being in the media interviews, and then you put him in a car, and it's F-bombs galore and fury. And yeah, he struggled in qualifying, and then the team, if you want to believe the conspiracy theories, which of course isn't right, they then sabotage his car, and that'll teach you for slagging off our car. But is it just showing a bit of inexperience with being in Formula One to publicly chastise a team, Gareth, after a difficult qualifying session?
Yes, needs a sports psychologist in a hurry. And we're Yuki maniacs. We really like Tsunoda on this site. But he's overdriving, and he's trying to deliver all of his promise in one big parcel right at the start of the season, and that's not the way to go about business. He needs to settle down, chew his oats, find his feet, and build that pace up, and it's going to come.
Echoes of Hauger from earlier for me a little bit. He's trying to do it all too quickly.
Absolutely, yeah. But I've got absolute faith that Tsunoda will be delivering great performances by the end of the season, and I think Pierre Gasly in the second seat is a fantastic benchmark for him, because I think Gasly certainly last season has been delivering superb results. So let's see what he can do. But he needs a sports psychologist to sort his mentality out right now.
Jacob, I saw you shaking your head briefly a little bit about that. Am I being a bit too harsh on Yuki here?
No, I think you can't come out and say that. One thing I will say, actually, I'm a little bit disappointed in AlphaTauri themselves. You go back to pre-season testing, and some mooted them as being third or fourth best car. So I don't think we've seen even Gasly extract the best from that car. But you certainly can't come in and slag the team off like that. I thought he was a bit disrespectful. He's certainly entertaining. I love watching him in F2 as well. His overtakes and got some fantastic wins. Very entertaining once we get to Monaco. He loves the traffic paradise, so we're going to be very entertained with him in Monaco qualifying, that's for sure.
Yes, we really are. And what I said earlier, we will go and talk about traffic paradise in particular with a certain Haas driver after the show. But just to round things off as we're approaching the hour mark now, top three drivers. And no, in fact, before we go into that, we've got F1 predictions from a Mr. Phillips to go through. So everybody else on the podcast in our first episode, if you want to go and listen to that, we spoke about who we thought the top five would be in the Formula One Championship. And Jacob, you weren't with us at that point, but I want to hear your thoughts on who will be, with just the benefit of 4 races, who are going to be the top 5 positions this season.
What are you talking about, Jim? I wrote those predictions in March. With the benefit of a bit of hindsight, I've had the benefit of 4 races. I think that, you can't now look past Hamilton. Verstappen will run in close, but I think once the season develops, I think Hamilton will start to run away with it. Will come to tracks that he likes, and as the season progresses, Hamilton typically starts to win more races anyway. I think that Bottas will have the measure of Perez. Obviously, we've seen Perez not having the best start, and Bottas, consistently might, score P3 every week. He'll pick up the odd win, so he'll be there. Perez in 4th. I think he's 6th at the moment, but he'll certainly be on the podium sooner rather than later. I actually think he might be on the podium finally in Monaco, and we might see him pick up the odd victory this season, but I'm less confident of that now than I was in March. And the 5th place driver, for me, it's between Norris and Leclerc. Norris has really, really impressed me this season. Obviously, we've seen that podium. He's consistently finished, although a little bit disappointing this week. But Leclerc 6th, 4th, 6th, and the 4th, so very consistent results there. I think that Ferrari, as the season progresses, might have the slight measure on the McLaren. So I'm going to say Leclerc will finish P5, and we'll see him on a podium soon. I'm sure, no doubt of that.
Yeah. Very good battle between McLaren and Ferrari, I think, this year. It's a shame it's the 3rd place, but it's really, really good to see. And you've got the benefits now of a few races in that Norris I wouldn't have even considered as a P5 contender, but it's great to see that he is, showing us just how good a driver he really could be for this season. But just to round things off, then we're going to go to you, Gareth, as you come back to the Talking F1 podcast. Your top 3 and bottom 3 for Formula 3. That's a lot of threes for me to say there, for the Spanish Grand Prix.
So top 3 will be Correa, Hauger, and I'm going to say Smolja, actually. Yep. So those 3, because, obvious reasons, actually, we've gone over it a lot. So, and for the bottom 3, I'm going to say Leclerc. Chauvet, just because I was expecting such big things after your interview with him in the grandstand, Jim, and he did so well in F3 Asia, and then just to see him not being there, and I didn't know why, and it was just really disappointing. And the Genza was underperforming this season in this race anyway, and then I don't know, actually, on the last one. I'm just going to have a bottom 2 this week.
Bottom 2. Thiemo, anything from you with your top 3?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go the other way around, the bottom 3 first. I think Stanek, just because he was decent last season, didn't really seem anywhere this weekend for me. Fittipaldi as well, because, again, I was kind of expecting a little bit more from him, but there we go. And then who was my other one? Sargent, because I'm being bad cop. But then top three, I'd say Martin, because where did he come from? Happy to see Rocky doing that well. Vesti for just being solid over the weekend, and then Correa as well. I'll agree with Gareth on that one. It's just great to see him come back and excel.
Jacob?
I think it's going to be a reoccurring theme here because I've also put Correa in there. My top three. It was a great comeback and fairy tale story, if you like. I've actually gone with Hauger as my second driver. After his disappointing, he could have won the second race there, but he showed great maturity on the Sunday. He stormed to an absolutely barnstorming victory there, leaving that victory in no doubt. And the third driver I've chosen is Victor Martin, just because he's a rookie, he came from nowhere, and it was great to see him on the podium there in race 2. As we go down to my bottom three, I have chosen Leclerc, just because I thought, maybe it was the whole name thing again. I thought that he would really be up there, but disappointing qualifying, penalty as well, so not great from him. And I've actually gone with Gareth on this one. Yes, Pierre-Louis Chauvet. Obviously, a great interview which you can go back and watch, guys, on the gpgrandstand.com. But yeah, disappointing. He ran Guan Yu Zhou all the way in the F3 Asia over Christmas. I really thought he'd be up there, certainly pushing the top 10. And to be honest, I didn't actually ever remember seeing him on the broadcast on the race. I totally forgot about him, to be honest. And my number 3 driver, I'm going to go with someone down the bottom there. Not too familiar with his name at all, but Laszlo Toth, maybe? I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
I'm sure you're not, but that if you listen to that interview, actually, you hear me mispronounce some Instagram usernames, so I completely know what that's like. But yeah, I don't have PLC Chauvet. I don't have him in my top 3 or bottom 3, but on his defense, I would say that he did gain an awful lot of positions. I think he was almost the emblematic person to show how poor. He was in 29th place, I think he qualified, and that is just going to hurt you all weekend. So I really think he was in Formula 2 and Formula 3, shows how important qualifying will be this year for those 2 race series. But my top 3, I went for Hauger. I thought he's really shown that he's going to be championship favourite for this year. I also went for Caldwell just for being there and keeping out of trouble, and I think that could be the key thing, that he could not necessarily mount a championship battle, but he could be there or thereabouts for keeping his nose clean. Is that something he can do? And yeah, Correa, because of obvious reasons. I could just be an echo chamber and say the same things, but we don't need to go through that. Bottom 3, I went for, and this might be a bit controversial from what we spoke about earlier, but I went for Schumacher. But I think for the same reasons, I was looking out for him, and I saw him slide back in the first race. He was pinballed off, fair enough, in second race on a move that I think he should have really got that move. It's just unfortunate that he was hit off because of those dodgy curbs. I've also got Van der Helm, who in a similar way, who's this guy? But the MP Motorsport team were doing pretty well. I know, Gareth, you were speaking to some of the drivers beforehand, and Martins did well, and Calais did well, and this guy did nothing really. So I didn't see him on the broadcast. So that's where I went for. And also, very controversially, I went for Hauger again, top 3 and bottom 3, just because of that move showing a bit too much impatience, that he really could have had 2 victories this weekend if he backed out of that move. The curb took him by surprise, I think. I don't think anybody takes that line into turn 1 in Barcelona, but yeah, it could have really been an even better weekend for him. And we're going to have to go really quickly, so no explanations, please, guys, with top 3, bottom 3 Formula 1. Thiemo.
Top 3 Hamilton, just because if the 22-second gap, if anyone's going to do it, it's still impressive. And then Leclerc, because he deserved it more than Bottas did for podium. And then Ricciardo, because he finally had a solid race and got some nice points. And then bottom 3, Haas's number 2 driver, Yuki, just because it was a bit disappointing all over, and Bottas, because, again...
That makes sense. Gareth?
Lewis, Verstappen, and Leclerc for the top 3, and Bottas, Mazepin, and Tsunoda for the bottom 3.
I'm actually going to jump in ahead of you, Jacob, because I've got the exact same bottom 3 on my end as well. Also, my top three were Hamilton, Leclerc, and the welcome return of Daniel Ricciardo. And Jacob, round us off.
Top three, Hamilton, welcome back, like you say, Ricciardo to my top three, and Charles Leclerc rounding off the top three. Bottom three, I've gone for that unnamed Haas driver, which I'm sure we're all aware of by now. Like he's going to say, he's going to appear there quite a lot this season. Yuki Tsunoda, unfortunately, also taking place there in my bottom three. And the third place, I'm going for the Red Bull strategists.
Yeah, it was a difficult call for them. But thank you, everybody, for talking F all with me. And if people want to find your work on the internet, Thiemo, where can they find you?
I'm at GP Grandstand, of course, and over on Drive Tribe. And if you want to follow my Instagram, it's t.albers.daily at Drive Tribe, sorry.
Yep. Jacob?
Yeah, of course, you'll see me writing several feature articles on GP Grandstand. And also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Jacob Phil18. That's on Twitter, guys. Okay. Thank you.
Brilliant. And Gareth Winslade.
You can find me on grandprixgrandstand.com, Facebook at the only Gareth Winslade on there, or Instagram at Gareth Winslade.
The one and only Gareth Winslade, imagine that. And for myself, you can find my writing on gpgrandstand.com and fortlock.com, and you can find my satire F1 news, the F1 week that was, on YouTube, and of course I'm on Grand Prix Grandstand TV to do some interviews and more talking F all, so have a look on those. Thank you everybody for listening to us talking F all, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode where I think we'll be talking F all about Monaco next.